Good afternoon, everybody. It's March 9th, I believe, right now. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about the 2024 Skidoo release. And this isn't going to be a typical video like I usually do when a release comes out, kind of going over every little detail. And I don't even go over every little detail. My videos are kind of topical. But if I'm going to approach it from what I really like about the lineup and maybe some things I don't like about the lineup, from kind of like my perspective, that's all. And if you wanted a more technical video, I won't be offended if you click off mine. And there's way better, like way more detailed technical videos that you can find. I would encourage you to go to Snow Tracks TV, the Super Tracks YouTube channel, Snowgoer, who else does it? Snowmobiler Television, although their stuff's very, like, they're not very technical in what they do. It's just like everything rocks, it's a beast, blah, blah, blah. But they, show you decent shots of the sleds, and especially the Arctic Cat. They went kind of nuts on all the Arctic Cat sleds this year. So, and then Snowtech also, lots of really good technical knowledge and technical overview of those sleds. So I'm going to come at it from mainly me as being a consumer and a bit from the business perspective of it, but not too much. Anyway, yeah, I had a lot of messages on Facebook about like, hey, why don't you put out a video about the 2024s? And part of the reason why I didn't right away was I was admittedly a little jaded and wasn't super excited about the release this year, just because the price of admission, like the price increases on these sleds are kind of ridiculous. Like, I know you get a lot comparatively from past years, like 15, even 20 years ago, but the price of admission is really high right now. When you can buy a car for the same price or cheaper than buying a sled, that's kind of nuts. So especially, like for me, it's 3.5 to 4 months tops that I can use the sled. And so, you got to do a price to benefit. And if you like make mad cash and this is a, very, very low percentage of your income, like, go nuts. But like I'm not in that realm. so I have to be a little more scrutinizing when I'm looking at purchasing something, like purchasing essentially what is a toy, right? So anyhow, other than that, there are some really cool things about this release that I do like. I like how BRP has kind of better organized the sleds. And I know it caused some confusion, especially with the MXZ and Renegades, where the MXZs are now 2 strokes and they now have the 137 track option. So that's where your 2-stroke Renegades went. They're just a sticker change to MXZ. And then anything 4-stroke is a Renegade. So they're pushing the Renegade name to be more of a 4-stroke trail sled. And it's 137 track length only. So I do like that change. I think in the future that's going to really organize those sleds, those product lines. So I do like that. I do like the okay, so admittedly I think the G5 is kind of an ugly sled. I don't really think the G4 is a nice looking sled either. But that's my opinion, subjective. Basically completely worthless. So I'm not a fan of the G5 sled. I do like the wide body a little bit more than the 2-stroke narrow body sled. So I do like the look of that sled a bit more. But yeah, I'm not really a fan of the looks of the sled, so that's also why I'm not really super excited about it. And I don't meld well with the ergonomics of the Gen 4 and Gen 5. So again, that's why I'm not really looking to even buy a new Gen 4 or Gen 5 sled at all. And I'm going to most likely keep my XM for the long term. Anyhow, another thing that I love is, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree, I friggin' love the colors this year. I love offbeat colors. When they did the Enduro back in, I think it was 2016 or 2017 or something like that, they had that desert, like kind of khaki desert, sort of almost a greeny type color. And they've brought kind of that desert color back. I love that color. That looks so cool on the snow. And like a lot of people agree that when they see that sled on the snow, it is sharp looking. And I also really love that Easter egg blue orange combination. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I just love offbeat colors, and I know people disagree with that, but I'm very excited to see that blue color on the snow. I think that's going to be such an interesting looking sled, especially the way the light. I think the Gen 5 looks better in light colors than in dark colors. The light plays the lines a bit differently depending on what angle you're looking at, and I think makes it a lot more visually interesting than the dark colors on these sleds. So again, just my opinion. But another thing is that I do really like is that they did keep the Expedition and Scandics and whatnot in the Gen 4 chassis. I think as a utility sled, the Gen 4 is actually pretty decent, just with a different, like with those higher, wider, flatter seats. It's a more comfortable, it's definitely a more comfortable ride. Like I use a Scandic at work all the time, both the wide track and super wide track Gen 4 900. And it's a very comfortable sled for doing work and being able to be in a neutral position. I think the seats and, you know, play a big role in that, and the way the handlebars are set up on those chassis. So, and the way they sit is just a little bit more neutral, and I like them better for that. I really like the XU, but the Gen 4 Scandics and Expeditions are really nice. On my recent trip to Scriber, it's Expedition country up there. Like everybody has an Expedition of some sort, and what I did notice is back in 2020 when the 850 was fairly newish, the clutching I found was really, they didn't have it dialed in. The clutching was super grabby on a lot of the sleds and made for really not very fun low speed riding. The new 850s in the Expedition Extreme and, you know, the newer sleds, I find are clutched a lot nicer. They're way nicer on takeoff and low end riding, and, you know, riding slow through single track trails. Such a nice experience compared to, you know, 4 years ago. So I'm really pleased they made changes there. And I just think the tracks, the suspension, everything they did with the Expedition line this year, especially in the last couple of years, has been really good. Like everybody that has an Expedition raves about them, and they love them. So good on them for putting attention into that line of sleds. I think that's a really, really good move on their part, because there's, you know, the dealership in Scriber, they sell more Expeditions than I think all the other sleds combined. So yeah, it's really good move on BRP for giving those an attention. I also really like that they pulled the Neos out and put them in their own category, the mid-sized category. I think that's nice to shine more of a spotlight on those as mid-sized youth sleds, and they're very, like, well-equipped, capable sleds for, I think, for the price that you pay, and you know, have a lot of potential, and are not just like good for 1 year and then you have to go to a bigger size sled. These will be good for multiple years for youth. So I think that, I think that's a really good move on their part. Want to talk about some things that I don't like, let's just say. I don't really like that the new gauge, like, I'm not into the gauge thing about having like a, you know, huge GPS stuff on the dash. If I want a GPS, I buy a Garmin and slap it on the dash, and that's about as good as it gets for GPS. So what I don't like is that the new 10.25 inch gauge is still kind of feature neutered compared to the 7S. I think it's a nicer looking display than the 7S, but I think the 7S still has, like from Polaris, the 7S display still has the edge for sure when it comes to the ease of use and the features that are baked into it. I would hope through some type of software update that BRP puts the like built-in GPS without having to use or pair a cell phone to the gauge, just because I think you're kind of crippling it, and then not requiring there to be a cell signal. So I think that's a very important feature that's missing. And yeah, I mean, aesthetically the gauge is cool looking and stuff, whatever. I don't think it's worth the $1,400 premium on the freaking price of a Sled, though. I don't agree with that. And but anyway, I'm not the guy who would be in the market for anything like that. I'd stick with the good old Casio watch 7.2 inch display. It tells me everything I need to know, and then I've got my Garmin that I can put on a RAM mount if I need GPS. So that's fine. Another thing that I don't know if Skidoo has addressed is the Gen 5 sleds with the removable drive shaft. There's issues with the spline wear and the gear, the drive gear rocking back and forth in the chain case because of that connection. And TKI, in another video, TKI does have a fix for that. But I mean, this shouldn't be a problem in a second year sled. Like those failures should be noted, and then a fix or a technical service bulletin or something should be done. So I don't know if Skidoo has updated that for 2024. There was no mention of anything in any of the marketing materials. There was no mention of anything on the forums from anybody that's kind of in the know. So I hope they've addressed it and beefed that area up. But I guess we'll see when the parts diagrams start hitting, and I'll take a look and check that out. But in the meantime, if you do have one of these sleds for 2023, and if they don't offer a fix in 2024, TKI I think has you covered there. They've got a pretty ingenious solution to basically solve that problem. It does require, I think, a little bit more. I'm not sure if it actually like gets rid of the removable function without taking the chain case apart, but I don't see the big deal in taking a chain case apart and the bottom gear off when you got to swap the track anyway. I don't understand what the big deal was there. It's not that difficult to do, and I mean, you don't change tracks like you change underwear. Like I don't see that was a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist in my head anyway. I mean, I could be wrong, but anyhow, yeah. So that's kind of my overview on Skidoo, and I've had a chance to try a couple sleds this year. I have tried a buttload of Gen 4s in all different engines, and while I don't really like the chassis or the seating position very much, the 4-strokes are a little nicer because the seats are more neutral and flat, so I can sit back a bit on those ones, and they're a little more comfortable. But the 2-stroke with the lipstick seat, I call it, because it looks like a stick of lipstick, but I find those seats very uncomfortable, and you're always getting forced into the gas, not the gas tank because they're sitting on it, but into the front of the sled near the handlebars. So I don't like that, but again, subjective, that's just me. But some of I find the 850 is much more refined now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. So that's really good. They've been obviously like incrementally improving the tunes, the clutching, that type of thing. One big surprise was I got to try all three of the 900 turbo engines. So the 180, the 150, and the 130. And honestly, the biggest surprise for me was the 130. I thought the 130 was going to be really like laggy and kind of feel mushy, and it's a pretty tight little package. I was very surprised at how punchy that little motor is. I mean, if you're holding it wide open a lot, it will heat soak a bit because it does not have an intercooler, and it will get a bit like doggy, but you really have to be abusing it to get to that point. But for a 4-stroke 900, like, I was really surprised at how like nice that motor was. So for those of you on the fence about a 130, it's a really good sled. It's a really nice motor, and I think if you're happy with a 600 level power and you want to move to a 4-stroke, that is a perfectly good option to do. So I would not shy away from that whatsoever. The 150 typical feels like the typical 150, like lots of power, lots of torque. The 180 is a friggin' beast. That motor is so nice, and it's got so much pull. It doesn't have the immediate, like an 850 or an 800 when you punch the throttle and it just takes off. It doesn't have that immediacy to it. I find the 4-strokes are really nice when you roll on the throttle, and then the boost builds as quick as you're rolling on the throttle, and they just pick up the skis and take off. And the massive hit of torque is like very addicting on those, and it comes in at such a like an immediate RPM. You don't have to rev it up like the 2-strokes to get that hit of power right away. So the 4-strokes are a different sled to drive. Like, I find I had to change the driving style slightly than that of a 2-stroke. Subtle throttle movements on the 4-stroke, and the engine's such a sweet, just quiet, very low tone, but like a strong low tone out of the exhaust. It's just a really cool experience to drive one of those. Very, very planted, just because of the weight on the front end. Super planted sled. It was actually really enjoyable to try one of those, and it was in a Gen 4 chassis. But man, what a beauty sled. Like, really, really cool. So anyway, yeah, and then the next thing I want to talk about was Lynx, and I am really, well, I was never really like concerned or cared much about Lynx. I mean, they're amazingly nice sleds, very well built, very tough, really awesome suspension, a little busy visually, but like, to each their own. I'm paying them a lot more attention now, especially the past 2 years, where they brought the X-Terrain and X-Terrain Brutal sleds, back into the North American market. If I had a gun to my head right now and somebody said you have to get rid of your XM, you have to get a new sled, I would honestly, seriously look at the Lynx X-Terrain RE with a 900 turbo. It's standard equipment. It's got wicked shock package. It's got all the bracing. It's already got the killer front and rear bumpers that are heavy duty suspension. Like, it's just the wide front end on it, a 146 track, which would be totally fine, with the track that I like actually already on it. So it would be almost minimal customization. And if you look at what comes on that sled and the price that they're advertising it for in Canada, it's actually a pretty decent deal as far as I'm concerned. It's like you're getting a lot of sled for some pretty good money, brand new. And the only other things I would ever do to it was, massage the clutching gearing for the trails I ride, and like grip and rip brace kit, because I always throw those on no matter what. And then if there's a greasable bushing kit, I would do that. And then if there was some type of blow off or diverter valve to eliminate turbo flutter and turbo cavitation, I would do that. and possibly an oil catch can, you know, just to keep the dirty oil, dirty intake or blow by out of the intake stream. And that's about it, really. I mean, the Sled is pretty amazing. Now, am I in the market for one? No, not at all. I've done so much to my XM, and I bloody love that sled. And I don't let many people ride it, but the few people I have let ride it have come off of it, and I've had one person slightly annoyed because they asked me how much I paid for it and how much I put into it, and I told them, and then they were shaking their head going like, I just paid double that for, you know, for my sled, and that sled can out handle it by a long shot, and it's a longer track, and you know, like they're like, I'm kind of upset that I just didn't mod my old one. And anyway, so that made me feel good about the amount of time and effort I put into that XM and making it exactly what I wanted, and I'm just very, very happy with it. And this latest trip, I wanted to test out my clutching and my gearing, so I found a really nice flat, like dead flat section of lake that had been relatively packed, and I just let it off the chain. So, you know, not hammered the throttle to the bars, but rolled on the throttle, because I didn't want to, if I'm not geared high enough, I didn't want to have the clutches completely closing and possibly ruining my belt. So I rolled on the throttle real slow, built speed, and I did hit GPS, not speedometer. I did hit the theoretical maximum speed of 157 kilometers an hour at full overdrive in the clutches. I still had more throttle and the engine was still pulling. So I was very happy with that. Obviously my 800 is a healthy motor, and I could probably stand to go up another gear tooth or two on the top, and I think that the clutching would pull it. But I'm very happy. I never ever go that fast. It was just sort of an experiment, and I am happy with how my sled handles on trail and how it reacts to throttle inputs on trail with the gearing and clutching I have. So I'm just going to leave it, I think. And yeah, I don't need to go any faster than that. So it's all good. But anyway, very happy with my XM, and I think the XM is a very underrated platform. I think it's one of the best platforms that BRP has come out with, because there's so much versatility for people that want to modify them or convert them into, you know, long track trail sleds or crossover sleds. Yes, they're just very, very versatile and a very well-oiled platform for that, and a very neutral riding platform where, like I was saying before, I can slide my butt forward or backwards 5 to 6 inches, and it dramatically changes the ski pressure on that sled, much like an Access chassis. So very happy with that, and I think I'm going to stick with it for the long term. I'm actually, might sound semi-insane, but I'm actually considering talking to Big John from Sled Racing, and possibly going to ask him to, if he would, build me a long block 800 E-Tech, and prep it for long-term storage so that I can have it on the shelf when my motor starts to get tired, literally swap the motor out, swap my injectors, exhaust, intake, you know, that type of stuff into it, put it back in break-in mode, and then send the motor that just came out of it in for a full rebuild and stick it on the shelf. And if I ever sell the sled, it'll come with a spare motor. So that might seem like dumb, but if you look at the dollars spent on a brand new engine in my sled, which is basically brand new condition because I keep it like new, then I don't think it's that stupid. Especially if the new 800 from Big John comes with his porting and you know, his enhancements, and you know, and so it's just breathing new life into this sled that still has a lot of excellent years left in it. Anyway, this is getting long-winded, so I'm going to cut her off there. And yeah, that's my musings on Skidoo for 2024. And yeah, and hopefully everybody's had a great winter and springtime conditions are good for you. And I see that the used sled market is, at least in my area, is starting to really cool down. So that's also very good news. The kind of COVID pricing is starting to go away now. And some of the dealers I see have actually leftover sleds. So hopefully we will see some freezing of prices of new sleds and allowing people's incomes to kind of catch up with inflation over the next few years. That would be very good and good for the sport as well. Anyway, signing off. Everybody, hope you're having a great day. I realized I forgot to talk about the 850T, which was a massive oversight on my part. It's not an engine that I'm interested in terms of like wanting to actually get one, but I think engineering wise it's pretty cool. Obviously, you know, they've been planning it for a while, but it's a nice answer to the Polaris Boost. What I really like about it is the way they did the weight reduction on that engine with the methanol water injection, which is not a new thing. That's been around since planes in the World War. So it's not a new technology. Very, very mature technology, especially in automotive turbo drag racing, that type of thing. But I think one thing that's really nice about it is that it eliminates the use of an intercooler for the two-stroke. And the two-stroke's not a high boost application where, you know, you can get away without an intercooler up to certain boost levels. And I think with the water methanol injection, that's a very easy and relatively low-tech way of cooling the intake charge without having the added weight, complexity, plumbing, etc. of having to put an intercooler on the front of the sled, as well as the venting and air, airflow management of an intercooler. So it's nice that they've been able to incorporate that. I know some people were worried about the reliability of that system, but it's like, how often does your window washer fluid pump and stuff stop working? Like, it's super robust. I'm not worried about the mechanical operation or reliability of that system. I mean, this stuff is all well established. The pumps used for this type of stuff is like well worked out. I don't think there'll be any issues with the function of that system whatsoever. And another nice thing about it is that if you end up running out of the like if you're mid-trip and you end up running out of the methanol mixture in the tank, it's not going to put the motor into limp mode or anything like that. All it's going to do is limit the boost. Basically, you'll still be able to have boost. It'll most likely limit the amount of time that you'll be able to be in the boost and the frequency that you'll be able to use that boost. So once the intake air temperature goes up and there's no go juice left, then it'll tell the turbo or it'll control or lower the boost level so that your intake air temperature is kept in a manageable level. And I think that's a nice way to do it, so that you're never ever gonna fall below what a naturally aspirated 850 makes, which I think is a really reasonable solution for that. So very, very nice way of engineering that, I think. And a lot of people I've heard the comment that Skidoo's playing it really safe with this. This is a measure so that it doesn't blow up the motor, yada yada. I was like, yeah, that's part of it, I think. Methanol injection in a lot of automotive applications is basically not a crutch, but it's a safety measure just to ensure that intake air temperatures don't rise too high and cause detonation. you know, there's also more complicated things about when you inject methanol and what happens right in the combustion chamber, and how it's oxygen displacement and other things happen that are like way more advanced. I'm not going to get into here, but methanol does more than just cool the intake charge. It can actually help with emissions in a lot of cases. So there may be some emissions benefits with injecting that at higher boost levels and whatnot into the two-stroke. So that could be sort of a side benefit of it. But really, really neat motor. I think really cool package they came out with. In the competition package, a lot of people were kind of complaining that there's no smart shocks available in that, but this is the competition package. It's not supposed to have smart shocks. It's supposed to have, you know, manually tunable suspension. Smart shocks to me are more of a high miler performance trail machine, not necessarily, you know, the sled that's really close to the race sled. So yeah, smart shocks are more of a on the consumer side of stuff, not necessarily on the race side of stuff. And you know, so I'm really happy with that package. And obviously other people are, because that package sold out, I think, within 24 to 36 hours of the announcement. And I'm really excited to see how it performs. And even though I'm not ever going to be in the market for a sled like that, but I'm pretty excited to see how that sled performs this year. And I think they really hit a home run with it as far as I'm concerned. Again, pricing is a little crazy, I think, on some of the sleds, but obviously people are paying them, so who am I to complain? Anyway, good job on Ski with that one as well.